All right, good morning, everybody. Definitely am excited to be here to talk to you today. This is a little bit different for me. Normally, when I'm asked to speak and talk to people, I'm talking about something that's highly technical. I've been in IT for 25 years in a variety of different capacities. This is an opportunity, though, to talk about something that really is near and dear to my heart, and it's about culture and creating a culture where we have a lot more courage. And we can talk about the different ways to bring in courage to what we do, how we lead, and how we move things forward. Cool that my iPad is not syncing up with me. So let's talk about something that doesn't really show up on our dashboards and our KPI metrics. And it's not an architectural thing, but it's something that we can use to power everything we do, and that's courage. I want you to think of courage not as a soft skill, but rather as a system upgrade. It's the operating system that enables us to lead through complexity, uncertainty, and transformation. Let's explore how courage can become our most strategic asset. How does courage relate to IT leadership? Well, in IT, we are constantly navigating change. I think that's something that we could all agree on. We have new technologies, evolving threats, shifting business priorities. But what often holds us back isn't often technological debt, but rather emotional debt. The fear of failure, fear of speaking up, fear of being wrong. Courage helps us cut through all of that. It's what allows us to challenge legacy thinking, advocate for security, and lead digital transformation. Courage enables decision-making under uncertainty, drives innovation, and builds trust across teams and stakeholders. So, courage in action. Well, seeing is believing here. There's some times where, maybe I had an opportunity to be a little bit more courageous. We'll start with the examples of where things went wrong. One of those times was not too long ago, but was actually in a hiring process. I was working on hiring a role that I thought was extraordinarily valuable. All roles are, but in this case, it was something that we needed to really hit a home run. First interview was really great. I really liked this candidate. I thought she was fantastic. Second interview, which is our technical interview, and our process, the technical interview is, it's challenging. This candidate hit an absolute home run. I couldn't have been more excited. So excited that I ignored one of the oldest red flags in the book. When something seems too good to be true, it usually is. It was so good that I moved past our third step in the interview process. I accelerated and got this team member ramped up right away. And we found out within a couple days that we were catfished in the interview process. Somebody did a really good job of either using a team to help them on their interview or some other technology perhaps. But it was one of those times where, from a courage perspective, I should have really been able to feel comfortable in grabbing a hold of that red flag and speaking up. And frankly, I didn't, probably because I got caught up in the emotion and the excitement of bringing in a really great candidate. So in the face of that, we altered the hiring process. I agreed to stay a little bit more within the guardrails and make sure that we implemented a little bit more stringent vetting as we move forward. So we had, going back to a really early time in my career, this is at the dawn of the internet. I used to work for a car dealership many years ago, and I developed the first website for this car dealership. I was really excited about this. It was a new and challenging space. It was a lot of fun. My focus, though, was on a user experience. When you're a customer, what are you going through when you go to buy a car? What information do you need? How can we make this a real value add using new technology? Remember, this is like the late 90s. Don't want to date myself too far, but this is before everything was digitized. I did have a general manager who was a bit of an old school type guy. And he used the phrase that I will never forget, that he wanted to make sure that that website had more hooks than a Lake Erie fishing boat. So I let that comment really change my clean, smart, efficient design into this wild experience on the internet that led to confusion. It may have led to some sales leads, but to be honest with you, those probably came through with a happy accident, you know? And I think really when I look back on that, where could I have been more courageous? Well, easily I should have spoken up. Where was my psychological safety? You know, where did that happen? Well, I didn't know better. I was a young guy just trying to make something happen. And I saw right away, and I'll never forget this, how important that user experience is and why being courageous would have allowed me to improve. You know, I had another more recent event, I guess, when we were looking at evaluating a software solution. This was a tough one for me because it was highly technical. And I did understand what leadership was going for. It was a very real concern. It was really something that I was interested in. I had a dissenting view. Everybody else in the room, though, was shouting, go, go, go. I was quietly saying, no, 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 trying to hold back and trying to stay. Partially because I knew that the solution was expensive. Partially because I didn't believe that it could accomplish all the goals, even though everyone around me was clamoring for success and that it would definitely work. Spoiler alert, guys, it definitely did not work. We spent a lot of time, a lot of energy, more importantly, a lot of money on trying to ram a square peg through a round hole. You know, I have a really great team. I'm really fortunate in that area. So they were persistent. They tried their best. They did everything they could do. But looking back on that, and for me to have that courage to go into my leadership to tell them, look, guys, this is a mistake. I wish I had that then. So recently, I read an article, listened to a lecture, a guy named Alex Budick. Not sure if any of you guys have heard of him. He is a social entrepreneur, an author, and a faculty member at UC Berkeley. And he talks about the 6 types of everyday courage. Each has its own unique risks, actions, and payoffs. So everyday courage starts with social courage. It's our opportunity to encourage ethical behavior by speaking up when others stay silent. You know, the risks here, pretty simple. You know, status loss, career penalty. The action, though, that I would ask you to take here is to speak up even when others stay silent. Something I just mentioned, you know, could have been something I did better. The payoff, though, here is a culture of psychological safety that encourages ethical behavior. We talked about that psychological safety just a minute ago, so you can see how important it is to both of us. Next, moving on to moral courage. Moral courage is a way to build long-term trust and brand integrity by prioritizing your principles over profit. That sometimes can be difficult to hear, but the reality is when you prioritize that principle over profit, you can build long-term trust and brand integrity. That brand integrity could be your own brand, your personal brand, who you are. It could also represent the brand of your company, place where you work. Emotional courage. Emotional courage is really, we just kind of touched on this a bit a moment ago as well, where we're really focusing to increase our engagement, trust, and resilience by just staying steady in times of crisis. Being able to someone who can be the calm hand, the steely nerves, being there to move things forward, even in difficult times. In IT, it feels like there's always some kind of crisis. So for us, it seems like it happens a lot. But if you can do that, you can stay steady, you have a really strong payoff here. You know, you're looking at increased trust, engagement, resilience within your teams. So continuing our everyday courage options, talk about intellectual courage. Intellectual courage is a place where you're going to question your own assumptions. You know, you can use this to accelerate your learning. You definitely have some risks, first of which is just being wrong, maybe also being indecisive. But by questioning your assumptions and inviting dissenting views, you can achieve faster learning cycles. And when I say inviting dissenting views, I really mean get out of your own echo chamber. If everyone around you is just constantly agreeing with you, you need to invite some more people in. Groups like this, groups like SIM, groups like many of the other IT organizations that you can bring in viewpoints and share knowledge, extraordinarily value here. But it does take a bit of courage to move forward and accept that. We have creative courage here. This is where bold ideas happen. So where we innovate. But that comes with a big risk. Failure, sunk cost. No one wants to see something just go wrong. Sure. But sometimes you have to take that step forward. You have to enable your teams to create the bold ideas and give them a spot where they can test these things, even if it's just a small test. Get the test out there. This is how you get to breakthrough innovations and truly driving growth, rather than doing the same thing or just taking incremental steps. If you want to really break through, well, it takes a little bit of creative courage. Physical courage. So this isn't one that is, obviously apparent to most folks in IT, where you have to step into some place that's a little less than safe and risk your personal safety. But there are times where you may have an opportunity to show up in a high-risk area and, kind of see the situation firsthand. Maybe some of you guys work in manufacturing. Factory floor is a great example. I work for a sand mining company. So every now and then we got to show up at the sand mine and see what's going on. Really be able to see and connect with the problem face-to-face. That builds immediate credibility with your frontline teams and generates fact-based problem solving. So you can connect those dots. You can see visually what's happening in front of you and move things forward. So in thinking of the lessons of everyday courage that Alex shared and that I paraphrased, there is a strong parallel to IT. We have lots of opportunities to lead courageously. Some examples of this are things that I'm sure many of you have dealt with. Active listening during crisis, listen fully to teams' needs during outages, and build your trust. And really, this is one of those things where you have two ears and one mouth kind of for that reason, right? Use them in that ratio. Listen. Courageous communication, I've talked about this one already. This was something that I think for me has been a huge area of opportunity for me to be able to speak, to really, whether it means disagreeing with people that you normally agree with, speaking vertically or speaking horizontally into your own teams, communicating with courage is important. Lead with empathy here is a good example where we're going to combine different strategies of everyday courage. It's one of those things where you're going to show your vulnerability and your empathy when you lead with empathy. It's going to happen. You have to be vulnerable here. But if you're going to create resilient, collaborative, and motivated teams, this is how it starts. And lastly is embracing ambiguity. I think this is something that's very common in IT. We have to be comfortable with change. We have to be comfortable with not knowing everything. Whether it's a cloud migration to that you're just going to dive right in to just accept the growth and the opportunity. This is a place where innovation happens. So confidence versus courage. Confidence is a feeling. Courage is a choice. So confidence is often mistaken for courage. But as I said, confidence is based on what we know. Courage is what we choose to do even when we don't know. That's important. You don't have to be ready to act courageously. You just have to decide to do so. In IT, many of us get trapped in that space where we're waiting for more data, more certainty. It's one of those things where it can limit us in our ability to move forward. You can move forward with conviction even when confidence is low if you have courage. Do the right thing simply because it's the right thing to do. This mindset shift is critical. It is how innovation occurs. It's how transformation occurs. Courage drives action in the face of ambiguity. And IT leaders can then lead boldly and inspire their teams to do the same. So courage isn't just personal, it's cultural. As IT leaders, we must create environments where people feel safe to take risks. Psychological safety, again, coming back to it. Let's celebrate those courageous acts, whether it's a bold idea, a tough conversation, or a failed experiment. We should normalize the risk-taking and the transparency. The best way to do this, though, is to model it yourself. When leaders show courage, it becomes contagious. And as we mentioned, the psychological safety aspect again, this courageous culture fosters that. It helps grow this organically. Once you start that psychological safety culture, this just keeps growing and growing. Innovation just is a snowball. Not just innovation, but also accountability comes from that, and it'll empower your team to act decisively and support one another through the tough challenges. So courage in action. So this time, we're going to talk a little bit about some areas where I was courageous, some things that went well. In the call center days, I had a call center guy talking earlier. Shout out to you. I worked for MCI WorldCom a long time ago. I was in mass markets and telemarketing and customer service call center. We had roughly 1,600 people on the sales floor at any moment. I was in IT there. A lot of fast-paced movement. It was largely sales and service oriented. In this case, I had a sales manager in the evening who knew that they were really close to their quarterly goals. But he also knew that it was not likely that they were going to hit them. I was the only IT guy there that night, of course, that was on site. He came to me and said, "Hey, Kurt, what do you think about finding a way for us to stay on the phone for an extra hour after hours?" Sounds pretty simple on the surface. I can tell you it's not. In a call center, when you have that many people making outbound calls, there's a lot of things that are happening behind the scenes. Number one, where are the leads coming from? Where are the numbers? How do you configure the dialer to auto dial for that time? How do you handle third-party verification? When a sale gets made, your call gets transferred over to somewhere else, and they have to verify that that person actually meant to purchase the service. Some of this stuff has kind of gone a little bit away because we're a little more modernized, but back in the day, this is how it had to happen. So I looked at this as a time where I could be courageous, right? I could take a risk. I could help these guys out. So I knew that I was going to be there anyway. I was booked to be there late at night to do some hardware maintenance. So I thought, how can I be impactful here to the business? How can I help these guys achieve their goal? Well, let's start by making some phone calls. Called the folks, the different support entities that needed to be apprised of the situation. Put a quick call out to my IT leadership. As expected, they didn't answer the phone in the evening. Sent them an email, a little bit of CYA. And then we rolled the dice. We got them fired up. Got them an extra calling. All my friends out in Hawaii got bothered that night for a proposition to change to MCI long distance. But within 30 minutes of that extended calling, these guys hit their quarterly goal. And the whole call center erupted. They were so excited. It was very, very great to see that I took an action and impacted all these people. What wasn't so exciting was the next day when I got the first email from my boss that was challenging why I did that, given that that's not something that we normally did. So as I was writing up my response to him, explaining, my business justification and why it needed to happen, I was supported by sales management, center directors, and a number of other folks in the organization complimenting me and thanking me for taking that action to drive that home. So on one hand, it didn't feel great getting a little bit chastised, but being courageous, seeing that there was the light at the end of the tunnel that wasn't actually a train was really helpful there. So I'm glad I was able to help empower them. Another time was when I was in corporate IT, and this is one that was really, it was doubly challenging. I had really just stepped into a leadership role where I had to take my hands off the keyboard. I had to delegate. I had to allow my subject matter experts to be subject matter experts. And we're going through this data center process, and I had some really strong table stakes that I wanted to make sure we had diverse path routing, that we had resilient networks, that we had all these things. Everything needed to be in place, and we go to do some testing of the new service. And I have a really bright guy on my team, happens to be here today, Eli, who said, this is definitely not what we think it is. And I said, all right, we're pulling the plug. We're going to stop. So I had to walk into my vice president's office and say, hey, man, I know we've already communicated this outage window. I know we've already told everybody and their brother that we're going to do this big data center uplift, but we are not doing it. We're going to wait a week, even 2 if we have to, until we get this sorted out. I had something at that moment that many of you don't have, or hopefully you do at some point, and that was that psychological safety, because I knew that my leader, my vice president at that time, had a lot of confidence in me. He had a lot of trust in my judgment. So we held off, solved the problem. Again, Eli's a bright guy, so it was helpful. So we get through that, and of course we have an outage from our carrier just a few weeks later, and our impact was minuscule because we took that step, because we had that awareness. So, and last one I'll give you is one that was really difficult. Providing this steady leadership, that emotional courage during times like COVID. Now, we all went through it. I don't want to belabor the point, but I guess things were a little bit different for us at my employer. During that time, we were all dealing with this global pandemic and understanding what that meant. We shifted to everyone being remote, which was challenging in and of itself, supporting all that, but also keeping the spirits up of my own team and helping them move forward. We were still dealing with regular IT crises. P1 tickets don't stop just because there's a global pandemic, right? And then on top of that, to make matters a little bit more fun and interesting, our company also went through a Chapter 11 bankruptcy. So now we had financial uncertainty on top of just general scared and tension and fear of the unknown that was happening. So what did I do? Well, I leaned into my emotional courage. I provided that steady hand, that calm leadership voice. Even though inside, okay, if I'm being honest, in this room, if we're in the safe space, I may have been a little bit nervous myself. It's true. But for my team and for those people that were inside of my sphere of influence, they're not seeing that. What they're seeing is calm, level-headed, someone who can just continue to guide and lead. And it made a difference. We came out of COVID as a team so much stronger than when we went into COVID, that time period. And I don't just mean just because we, did some kumbaya sessions over virtual meetings and stand-ups and things of that nature. No, I mean actually because we tested systems. We tested our ability to recover, tested our ability to be resilient, refined things, made processes more iterative, and were able to just drive change through those challenging times. And if you can get through all that stuff, it makes many of the other things that you're going to encounter just a lot easier. So take action now. It's a part of the conversation where I want to make sure you guys understand it. I want you to be empowered and courageous to take that action. We return to our metaphor where courage is the operating system. It's not just a patch, it's a foundation. It powers the innovation, resilience, and trust. So my challenge to you is, what are you going to do to be courageous today? Are we talking about maybe building out a safe space to test some bold ideas? Or maybe do another type of mining with some skip level reviews? Reach out, find out what people a little bit further down the stream are actually thinking what they're doing. Maybe that'll help you take some courage to build out your own leadership journey. Either way, let's not just manage systems. Let's lead with courage. Remember, as IT leaders, we're not just upgrading systems. We're upgrading culture. It's foundational for us as IT leaders to be able to do that. Everything you do in IT touches every aspect of your businesses. So why should you not take an opportunity to impact the culture of your organization? Thank you. Thank you for the time. I appreciate it. Feel free, as we mentioned with the groups and the things that we do, to keep in contact. I'd love to be a part of your journey as you move forward with leading with courage. You can reach me on my personal email, my LinkedIn, there's a QR code there too. But if nothing else, think of courage every day. Think of it as being a part of your own strategy and your own roadmap. And if you have any questions, I'd love to stay in touch.
Thank you.